Hello there! So, if maps were classified by genre, one of my favorites would be the kind that start out calm and slow, then gradually speed up to a chaotic frenzy of object spam. Like this. Unlike most maps that fluctuate in difficulty depending on a song's ups and downs, I find maps of this genre a bit further enjoyable for Osu for a video game. They have inherent difficulty progression that lets a player see the peak of their ability, whether that be the point at which they fail a map or when they can't comfortably handle it anymore. These maps also follow a song's intensity buildup in the most tangible way possible for players. Big spacing and extra circles can represent that already in normal maps, but having a natural tempo increase that requires gradually more strenuous aim and clicking speed makes a player truly feel the intensity increase. The sense of building panic that this induces is like something no ordinary songs can encourage through maps, and I know a lot of other players who would appreciate this like I do. That being said, I think it's unfortunate that there's so little selection of maps like this. Only a few maps have upwards tempo changes, and even fewer offer anything beyond small shifts. Songs like Delta Max that push musical limits are what I'd love to see more of, and the ranked section barely provides any. So, why is that? If players enjoy these maps, why are they so infrequent? Aside from the given not many of these songs exist in the first place, there's two fairly straightforward reasons I'd say. Compared to the average song, they're hard to time, and likewise, they require an unusual type of engagement to map. Having created 3 maps of this genre so far, I think I'm able to explain those reasons in proper detail, as well as show how, over time, I've improved the way I handle creating maps of these gradually speeding up songs. This was my 3rd ranked map, Hall of the Mountain King by Apocalyptica, a questionable song choice for someone with low mapping experience. Like almost all of these speeding up songs, their musicians likely didn't use metronomes or electronically produce the tempo increases, so its in-game timing was far more unstable than the average song, even those filled with minor human error. I attempted handling this timing in the only way I knew how back then, by placing 100 red lines with minor BPM changes. That's what anyone else would do in this situation, however I later found that this method was less than ideal. It makes for a fair amount of unexpected and therefore unpredictable timing variations, which in a game like Osu that requires precision, is a problem. For example, any player would anticipate the timing between 8 and 1 here to be the same as 1 through 7 prior. Because the timing tries to follow the song as faithfully as possible though, players need to click 23 milliseconds later than expected, which easily could lead to lowered accuracy, especially when players are expecting a speed up, not a slight BPM decrease. Using slider leniency to bypass timing issues was an option of course, but with so many tempo variations, there was no way to get around it sometimes. So perhaps unexpected timing seems like a necessary downside to these kinds of songs, but I did figure out a more reasonable approach for timing them later, which we'll talk about soon. Mapping-wise, I wasn't in the best position either. I'm not sure I knew the value of slider leniency in this context yet, I didn't know how to properly progress in difficulty, as in there was a difficulty spike near the beginning somehow, and I definitely didn't know how much of a role BPM played in mapping choices. I just made everything play uncomfortably, including 250 BPM chaos. Despite all that, public reception for the map was actually good. Better than most of my maps, in fact. This song carried it, I imagine, and maybe my inexperience with playability worked to my benefit for the musically insane climax, but regardless, I wasn't fully satisfied. As is with all my early maps, I grew to dislike it over time, and so I eventually decided to make another speed-up map. A map for Apocalyptica's Hall of the Mountain King. Okay then. Yeah, I mapped the same song twice, but this time it was the live version, through which I learned that Osu doesn't actually support my brand of stupidity. When making a map with the same artist, title, creator, and difficulty name metadata as another map, it enables this update to latest version button linked to the previously uploaded map. That's the reason why the unexpectedly large amount of people who map the same song twice use different naming schemes, some sillier than others. One thing I think each of us have in common though is our reason for mapping and ranking the same song twice. Redemption. We didn't like our initial versions, but we liked this song, so we believed it deserved a better map attached to it. That was part of my reason, but I had another incentive too. The live version was faster at the end. Faster means more panic, which means cooler map. Good reason, I know. Anyway, timing. I said I found a better way to time these songs than spamming red lines, and anyone who's seen the map in the editor should be aware of it. Remember, this is a live performance of a song. There's definitely no metronome or electronic mastering or whatever, yet somehow they played perfectly in time for long stretches of music. Or that's how it sounds at least, thanks to an external timing method. This is a topic I've intentionally avoided for a while, the way I time songs, just because I'm aware of how much people dislike it. It can ruin songs if done poorly and even if done correctly to some degree, but I still do it anyway because I find it faster and more practical for gameplay than using accurate red lines. It being editing the audio file to make sounds line up with the in-game metronome. While this can be done in any audio editing program, I prefer to do it in Sony Vegas. That's a program I edit videos in, and while it's not a proper audio editor, I'm more familiar with it than anything else. So the process. First, I time a map with approximated red lines. These don't need to be nearly as exact, nor as frequent as a properly timed map because all the stretches of incorrectness are fixed via editing. Second, I map the song. Even though it's incorrectly timed, I can figure out where sounds are supposed to land in the timeline, and that's good enough. And third, the editing. Basically, whenever there's a sound that doesn't line up with the in-game metronome, make a cut and move that section to wherever it's necessary, then replace the map's audio file with that. So for example, if we take that 23 millisecond gap from the first map, I could cut a bit before that timestamp, move it back by the specified amount, hit render, then have properly playable timing. Or it'll be off still, at which point I'll just readjust and listen again. Unfortunately, there's a lot of ways to mess this up, which is why it's got such a negative stigma surrounding it. By cutting in the wrong place or crossfading poorly, you get sound distortion, which obviously sounds wrong and is especially obvious in songs with vocals. While like half of my earlier maps are timed like this, I wouldn't actually recommend it because of how it can ruin sound quality. So that's how this map was timed. Even if you don't like the method, as a lot of Osu players wouldn't, you probably can't tell where any edits are made, plus the map doesn't have any weird timing shifts, making it, overall, a net positive I'd say. The way it was mapped, I want to say it was an improvement too, but it wasn't so black and white. The thing about BPM affecting playability was taken into account in the lamest way possible. Throughout the whole map, I used average, comfortable gameplay, like triangles, sharp angles, stuff like that. Then at the very end, I only used spacing you'd find on double BPM style maps. I was trying to make gameplay fair, but the map was all sliders and the easiest possible circles in the climax, which is like, honestly, just too easy for the song's intensity. Being too safe with playability was a detriment to the map in this case, and I feel it could have been done much better. Unlike the first version, I didn't have a difficulty spec near the beginning at least, but I did have an inappropriate difficulty spec nonetheless. There was a calm section between the choruses with a soft drum roll, and I made it a bunch of 225 BPM streams. Anyone capable of alternating from the jumps afterwards easier than the streams here, making it another instance of poor musical representation. When I had just created it, I liked this map more than my first attempt, but I'm not so sure I can agree with my past self now. Both versions kinda suck, one in unconventional ways and the other for being too conventional. If I wanted to redeem my initial inexperienced mapping, I should have probably waited more than only 9 months to redo it. Since then, I'd pretty much forgotten about the fun in mapping this type of music, until I recently came across an old song, Intermission by Blur, which I instantly wanted to map. I don't know about you, but whenever I start a map, I tend to check if anyone else has mapped it before, and I found a masterpiece in the process this time. 21 stars of pure genius timed with only 3 of the same red lines. Clearly it's not a serious map, but I mean, in spite of being nonsense, it gives off the right feeling. I wanted to make something as chaotic as this, just, a tad more playable. Being freshest in my mind, I can clearly explain how I tried to make this map fair for gameplay while still being engaging enough to match the song, both areas the Mountain Kingdoms failed to manage. Much of this was, again, handled through that BPM affecting mapping choices concept, which I really should have clarified earlier. This is an idea that most mappers seem to follow. When a song is slower, it can be more liberal with playability, and when it's faster, it should avoid overly dense rhythms and theoretically uncomfortable motions. As time between objects lessens, so does leniency of motion, making logic behind this pretty straightforward, I hope. And if an example helps, this is the reason why alternating maps are a classification of their own. They're too fast for standard gameplay patterns, and so they use more low spacing and smooth flow motions between circles. Or as another example, it's how people can design low BPM maps that cater to double time. There are no cutoffs for when standard patterns feel too extreme and the alternating map pattern should be used though, nor any cutoffs for transitions in between, which makes creating a map with a practically linear tempo increase rather tricky. To keep gameplay in check, a mapper needs to think about how the speed of the map affects playability of patterns every step of the way. While there's definitely no objectively correct way to do this, my map here has some pretty clear artificial cutoffs that I chose to center my BPM-based mapping around. Under 160 BPM, I let just about anything go through. Being strict with gameplay feels meaningless below that since most players are accustomed to faster maps, allowing me to use movements that involve looser snapping. Between 160 and 200 BPM is what I consider normal speed for Osu, so I tightened things up a bit. I still put in some linear patterns and odd back and forth side arrangements, but I expected players around this speed to leave less slack in their movement, so I avoided any weird rotational stuff. Upwards of 200 BPM, I tightened up even more. No more linear patterns or intentionally hard to play stuff, just more generic, natural movement, especially between circles. As that got higher, to about 250 BPM, I was as generic as possible, only triangles and back and forth jumps. When reaching the chorus of about 290 to 360 BPM, very liberal with timing here, you can tell I used a different visual design while also transitioning into a double BPM alternating style. Gameplay wasn't quite as linear as you'd expect for this BPM normally though, since I didn't want to make the same mistake as my second Mountain King. The map is truly climaxing here and I wanted it to feel like that. 360 BPM should have been the limit, but somehow the song goes even faster, reaching what's mapped as 450 BPM. This was now designed as a pure low spacing alternating map, which even at this speed is extremely challenging to play. But yeah, this is getting pretty esoteric since no maps will ever be this fast. Loose below 160 BPM, standard between 160 and 200, more conventional playability between 200 and 260, and something resembling double BPM style after that are the personal cutoffs that I consider the majority of the time while mapping. These are all just values that I feel match the way I've learned to play Osu, which directly make an impact on how I map, especially on speeding up maps like this where considering BPM is a uniquely crucial element. Without something like this in mind, these maps end up with unintentional difficulty dips or spikes, as seen in both of my Mountain Kings. This I think is one of the main reasons why these songs are hard to map, which along with a deathly pain of timing, is why these gradual intensity increasing maps are rare. Mostly just timing though. So that's that. If you're a mapper, you may have fun mapping these songs. It's hard and you won't time them right, but it's more engaging than making an average map, even if it's designed in a generic way. Also, the world needs a better Hall of the Mountain King. Apocalyptica's actually got a third one ready, this time with trumpets. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.